of the most important parts of a horror game is the setting. A terrifying setting creates atmospheric horror, which of course sets the tone for what to expect straight out of the gates. And when it comes to what type of settings in horror games that really creep me the fuck out, schools are definitely near the top of that list. Between the eerie setting of a school or just the fact that kids in horror movies and games are terrifying, something about a haunted or abandoned school just screams terror. So in this episode of Nerdspace Games, I take a look at the scariest and creepiest schools in horror games. Whether they are haunted, full of zombies, or just plain out creepy, these schools will make you think twice before setting foot inside of a school again. But for today's list, know that I'm only looking at horror games. Also, don't expect any universities or colleges of any sort. That'll probably be a completely different list on its own, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, my name is Ruben with Nerdspace Games, and this is the top 10 scariest schools in a horror game. Let's get it. Number 10, Lincoln High School, The Last of Us.
Guess they gonna hold him for long. That don't sound good.
The Last of Us isn't exactly the scariest game on today's list, and honestly speaking, I debated about including this entry at all. However, after thinking about it, The Last of Us is just as much of a horror game as Resident Evil 4, even though it's more action horror. On top of that, thanks to the zombie-like monsters created from a fungus, we definitely see our share of creepy creatures throughout the game. And on that note, one of the most dangerous monsters first appears in the abandoned high school of Lincoln High. That of course is the bloater. Taking the form of basically a fat clicker essentially, the bloater has the ability to attack the player from long range while also moving surprisingly fast for its size. Outside of the bloater, Lincoln High School has other elements to make it one of the scarier locations of the game. For one, the school is completely overrun with infected, more so than we have seen in most of the game up until this point, which clearly makes this section of the game one of the more intense moments thus far. Not to mention the amount of insta-kill creatures scattered in and outside of the school. Clearly, Lincoln High is one location that definitely keeps the player on their toes when playing through The Last of Us for the first time. Number 9, H Elementary, Deathmark. Deathmark is a new series that I've only recently explored thanks to the newest entry of the franchise, releasing earlier this year. As a visual novel horror game that forces the main player to face ghosts head on, the premise alone is scary enough to give you goosebumps. Then when you add this premise to one of the first locations you encounter a ghost in, then you'll see things take a turn for the worse real fast. After learning that you are going to die if you are unable to free the spirit that has cursed you, the player finds themselves at H Elementary School, a school that has been abandoned for years with rumors of a spirit known as Hanahiko. Hanahiko is a ghost boy that haunts the school, and according to the urban legend, he shows up in a mirror on the staircase of the school when you summon him. When he appears, you must answer certain questions with specific answers while also following the rules of the urban legend, or you'll die in a gruesome way. He's not the only ghost that you encounter in this school, as you'll find yourself back here in a later part of the game, but nothing scares you more than experiencing a ghost encounter for the first time in this game in the eerie setting of H Elementary. Number 8, Heavenly Host Elementary School, Corpse Party. Most of the entries on today's list features a school as one of many settings that the players explore in a horror game. However, there are a few entries on this list where the entire game takes place inside of a school. Take Corpse Party for example. This cross between a retro survival horror and a visual novel follows 9 friends as they find themselves trapped in Heavenly Host Elementary School, a school filled with dangerous spirits that exist in an alternate dimension that transcends time and space. The game also features a lot of decision making in which your choices can lead to one of 54 endings, most of which are bad endings that end with the death of one or multiple main characters. Without jumping into spoilers, Heavenly Host Elementary School has a dark history that revolves around the death of multiple students and teachers in the most gruesome way. Even before the school was haunted, there have been murders tied to this place, including 4 ghost children seen roaming around the school. These ghost children all have their tongues cut out, and one of them even has the top half of her head cut clean off. There are other dangerous spirits around the school too, including a ghost mannequin, a dark spirit in the nurse's office, and a ghost of a janitor that chases the group of 9 friends throughout the school with a hammer. Before playing this game though, know that it is not for the faint of heart. People die in some of the most gruesome and horrifying ways, and most of them are kids. Actually, there's a lot that I'm not showing in this video because I'm afraid that YouTube will snipe the hell out of me because of how gruesome some of these scenes can be. And nothing, and I mean nothing, can prepare you for a major reveal later in the game. Even if you might be able to guess what the twist is, the game definitely reveals it in the most shocking and disturbing way. And I'll just leave it at that. Number 7, Titan Elementary School, Dead Space 2. Before the remake of Dead Space, my favorite entry of the franchise was Dead Space 2. Exploring a full space station instead of just a single ship for a majority of the game provided a change of scenery that allowed for some of the creepiest locations seen in a sci-fi horror game. While none of these locations were as terrifying as the Ishimura, there were a few areas in the second game that definitely gave it a run for its money. For example, Titan Elementary School is easily the scariest part of Dead Space 2. This location is pretty terrifying for multiple reasons. For one, it's an abandoned school located in a space station, which combines two terrifying settings seen in horror games: schools and space. Next, what's scarier than aliens that are basically mutated human beings? Try mutated kids and babies. Yep, Titan Elementary is full of two new and unique types of necromorphs, the Pack and the Crawlers. The Pack is basically all the young kids that unfortunately met a grim fate as they became smaller versions of necromorphs. However, the Crawlers are much more terrifying. They are basically the infants of the space station who have become alien monsters that explode on contact. Yeah, exploding babies. Sounds like a good sweet time, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, it is not. These Crawlers will come out of vents in groups when you least expect it, and if you are not paying close attention to your surroundings, they will fuck you up fast. Trust me. Number 6, Wade Elementary, F.E.A.R 2. Another franchise I've explored for the first time in the last year is F.E.A.R. Prior to 2023, I've never played any of the F.E.A.R games, mainly because on paper it looked like a FPS action game and nothing more than that. Well, thankfully, I finally gave the franchise a shot, and man, I'm very happy that I did, because the first two games are a must play for horror fans. But in terms of today's list, we'll be taking a look at the second game specifically. Now, in my opinion, the second game is much scarier and much more of a horror game than the first. And the scariest location of F.E.A.R 2 is without a doubt Wade Elementary. Like, holy shit, this location completely shocked me, because up until this point, it was only somewhat scary. But the moment that we first walk into Wade Elementary, things completely hit the fan in the most terrifying ways. First off, the school is filled with some of the most terrifying scenery seen throughout the series. Bloody hallways, darkness around every corner, mutated creatures, you name it. Honestly, some parts of the school reminds me of the Outer World in Silent Hill. But probably the most terrifying part about this school is Alma Wade herself. In both games, Alma Wade is the main antagonist, as she's a constant presence in both games. But something about this school brings out the worst of her. She's way more present in this location, and she continues to haunt the player multiple times throughout the school, creating some of the most terrifying jump scares of the game. Between her presence, in which she is at her worst in terms of the scare factor, the gruesome and horrifying condition of the school itself, and the monsters that stalk the halls around each corner, Wade Elementary earns itself the number 6 spot on today's list. Number 5, Greenwood High School, Detention. Detention is one of the better indie horror games that I've ever played in terms of the story itself. The game explores both the realism and the supernatural in a way that is unique and different from any horror game that I've ever played. Set during the White Terror, a period of martial law set in Taiwan, we follow Wei, a student of Greenwood High School. Like with Corpse Party, Detention takes place inside of a school the entire time. And to be honest, there's very little I can say about the game without diving into spoiler territory. But here's what I can say. Two students, Wei and Ray, wake up in Greenwood High to find all of their fellow students and teachers gone and the school completely abandoned. It gets worse as they find out that the only bridge that leads back home has been taken out by a typhoon of what appears to be a blood river. Forced to return back to the school, the two students find out that the building has changed drastically. Classrooms are filled with blood, creatures known as the Lingered stalk the halls, and there are gruesome traps and chains scattered throughout the school that remind us of scenes straight out of a Saw movie. Number 4. St. Joseph Secondary School, Condemned Criminal Origins.
Help me.
Criminal Origins is one of the best underrated first-person horror games out there. The game follows Ethan Thomas, an FBI agent in Metro City who is hunting down a serial killer. Metro City has been taken over by criminals basically, and nowhere is safe in this city. And that includes St. Joseph Secondary School. While not the scariest location of the game, this school is still pretty terrifying on its own. Just like most of the city, the school is destroyed and beat down beyond recognition. On top of that, you have maniacs and creepy creatures roaming around the school. The enemies appear when you least expect them to, and the condition of the school, like many other entries on this list, is terrifying in its own right. Plus, the game features one of the scariest jump scares in a horror game, and it takes place here inside of the school. Oh, and side note, Ethan Thomas returns to the school in the sequel, Condemned to Bloodshot, in which the school has now become the destination for experiments conducted on the homeless. Number 3, St. Sibyl Catholic School, Outlast 2. The top 3 entries on today's list are all pretty terrifying to the point where I could honestly understand any of these 3 being your personal choice for scariest school in a horror game. But St. Sibyl Catholic School is one of the more unique entries on this list due to it appearing as a hallucination that the main character of Outlast 2, Blake Lingerman, experiences throughout the entire game. At different moments of the story, Blake will find himself back at this school, which we later learn is a way for him to face his past. However, each trip back to the school gets more and more terrifying as a demon inside of the school continues to stalk Blake throughout the halls. Unlike most entries on this list, St. Sibyl is actually clean and not broken down. Instead, the horror of this school plays on the fear of being alone in a dark school with voices and footsteps heard throughout the school. Then, as things get worse, the school becomes the main hotspot for what the Outlast franchise is best known for, jump scares. From a demon that appears when you least expect it to a girl's laughter throughout the halls of the school, St. Sibyl became a part of the game that players dreaded each time they were forced to walk the halls of this terrifying school. Number 2, Midwich Elementary School, Silent Hill. Outside of Resident Evil, Silent Hill is probably the biggest and most iconic survival horror franchise, especially in the early days of the franchise. And for a lot of people, Midwich Elementary in the first Silent Hill game is the scariest school in a horror game. And there's a lot of good reasons for people believing that. For one, the school is dark and gloomy, even before entering the nightmare world. Then when the world transitions, Midwich becomes even more terrifying with the rusted gates and chains filling the entire school. On top of that, the school is filled with blood and even bodies around each corner. Another major reason for why this school is so terrifying comes from the monsters inside of it. For one, you have ghoul-like creatures that resemble children with blades. These creatures attack the player in swarms, and no matter how many times you kill them, they always come back. And while not as dangerous at first, the school also has ghost children roaming around the classrooms. These ghosts giggle as they run around certain parts of the school. They can't hurt you, but man, do they scare the fuck out of you. Midwich also features jump scares like the one in the locker room, and it features the first boss of the franchise and, in my opinion, the hardest and scariest looking boss of the game, the Split Head. This creature may walk slowly, but as it gets close to you, it splits its head open as the name suggests and instantly kills you. Overall, this school is argued as one of the scariest locations in Silent Hill and one of the scariest schools in a horror game. In fact, it was such a great setting for a horror game that it appeared in Dead by Daylight as the location to represent Silent Hill in that game. So I totally understand if you want to give Midwich the #1 spot on your own personal list, but honestly, I just feel like that there is one school in a horror game that is even scarier than Midwich when looking at the entire package. But before we take a look at the #1 entry, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more survival horror content. Also, don't forget to leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. Finally, with so many creepy schools out there in horror games, I honestly couldn't fit every single one of them on today's list. So here are just a few honorable mentions that just barely missed out on the top 10 scariest schools in a horror game. Number 1, Yondu High School, White Day, a Labyrinth name school. For me, Yondu High is the scariest school in a horror game. As the name suggests, the entire game takes place inside of a single school. In hopes of returning something to his crush, the main character finds themselves sneaking into Yondu High after dark. After entering the school, the main character and 3 high school girls find themselves trapped in the school together as janitors of the school viciously attack and even murder the students that sneak in at night. As it turns out, the janitors are the least concerning part of the school. The school is actually filled with ghosts that only manifest at night. These ghosts haunt the school after dying in it in the most gruesome ways. Throughout the game, the main character will need to explore the school hallways that act as a labyrinth of some sort, unravel the mystery surrounding the school, and free the spirits of the school once and for all. Unfortunately, that's much more difficult than it sounds, especially on the harder difficulty. See, the hardest difficulty features a unique experience, and honestly, it's the way that I recommend playing the game. That's because there are ghosts that can only be encountered on the harder difficulty. Anyway, each ghost in this school has a dark history of how they died. From committing suicide, being murdered, or even dying due to an accident, each death in this school added to the amount of spirits haunting the halls of the school. These ghosts are what really make this game so terrifying. In total, the player can come across 20 unique spirits, each with their own story to tell. Some of the scariest spirits in this school include the Spider Ghost, a woman that crawls like a spider on the ceiling of random classrooms. The Woman in the Locker, a ghost that creates one of the best jump scares of the game. The Attendance Ghost, a ghost that comes running at the player when she first appears. And the Baby Soul, the ghost of an unborn baby that died when its mother killed it herself. The game is disturbing, and while the school may not feature the atmospheric horror setting seen in other schools on this list, the ghosts of White Day make it stand out enough to claim the #1 spot for scariest school in a horror game. But that does it for this episode of Nerdspace Games. Hit up the comments and let me know what you think of my list. Is Yondu High School the scariest school in a horror game, or is there a different school that deserves that title? Let me know down below. Anyway, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more survival horror content. Also, leave a like on today's video if you enjoyed today's topic. But thanks for watching, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next episode of Nerdspace Games. Take care.